Hello everyone and welcome, I'm Kiv, your favorite degenerate, and today I want to talk about how Halo Infinite is probably going to be having a fair few different types of brute enemies for us to face. And so today I thought I would discuss on what those enemies might be like and what sort of different types of brutes we can expect to see in the game. Now, I figured that it would be best to start with what we've seen already, and then take a step back and have a look at what we've seen in previous Halo games and have a bit of a stab in the dark to pretty much say, okay, maybe this, maybe that. But to get straight into things, the 2020 reveal showed us a fair few different things, and one of them was the first set of brutes that we come across in the reveal, and they are the red armored brutes who drop pod in, and they basically act like a set of ODSTs for the Banished. One of these brutes is holding the Ravager, and the other two are not carrying any weapons at all. They are just straight up roid raging brutes that just come charging at the Chief. And at this point, that's what I'm calling them. I'm calling them chargers because they're like a bull that has seen a red flag, because they just come at the Chief wanting to beat his ass. And I have to say, I think this is not like a new type of brute or anything like that. I think it's just a variation of what we've seen in the past, treating it similar to how a suicide grunt is compared to a normal grunt. It's still the same enemy, it's just they are going to go about trying to attack you in a different way to what we're used to. And I think this is great because it actually really fits in to how brutes are. And on harder difficulties, I can see these guys being very tricky, and that definitely makes sense for a few of the mechanics that they seem to have put into the game. So when you are trying to take one of these guys down, shooting them in the feet to make them stumble and slow them down, and basically give you a bit of breathing room so that way you can take them down if you're not well equipped enough to fight them in close quarters, because they are going to charge at you pretty relentlessly by the looks of it, and I can definitely see that making for some very stressful moments in game. Appearance-wise, you should be able to tell the difference quite easily, because by the looks of it, these brutes also happen to have a half helmet. You can see the bald patch on their heads from a mile away, so I think that will also help to make sure that you don't get confused and end up shooting the wrong brute thinking that one of the other ones is the higher priority. So I think that will help players to differentiate between these enemies and make sure that they don't make the wrong call accidentally and get cheated into a death. The other brute that is there holding the Ravager appears to be wearing a captain-like armor. It's difficult to tell, and it's hard to say how the Banished power structure works for their officers and things like that, but pretty much it's a bit of an interesting mix, because we haven't really seen any officer brutes that also have small little gadgets on them. So this one also has a jump pack. And while that's nothing we haven't seen before in other Halo games, Halo 3 specifically had brutes with jump packs, and they were actually a little bit more difficult to fight because they would continue to jump behind you and keep flanking you. So on harder difficulties, they were actually quite challenging. But it's a little bit harder to say on how much mobility they're going to have, because he seems to jump up with the jetpack, but then he only gets a couple meters up, and you can see it's struggling to bring his fat ass up in the air. And he definitely gets a little bit of air, but he doesn't particularly move a great deal compared to how much they used to be able to move in Halo 3. So a little bit interesting on that part, and if we're going to see many other brutes with jetpacks and how much mobility they're going to have. Moving on now, we have the brute miners. Now, these guys are just their normal foot soldiers. They are nothing particularly special, but from what we can see so far, a couple of them may have different armor configurations, which is a little bit more interesting than you may think, because some of them have blue armor like how they did in Halo 3, but there were a couple of brutes from the reveal which had a really different look to what we've seen in the past. This one has a grey and brown armor with a purple colored energy shield by the looks of it, and as far as I remember, I haven't seen something like this before. because these brutes also only carry human weapons from what we've seen so far of the game, and I'm not sure if this is particularly a type of brute that just doesn't mind using human weapons, or if they just have a different weapon that 343 is not willing to show us just yet. The other thing is that it could be trying to have that mix of different armor styles, because we've seen in some grunts and jackals that some look like 343 era, some of them look like Halo 2 or 3 era. So it's a little bit difficult because the Halo 2 brutes did have grey and brown armor, but they didn't have as much as what this brute is wearing. The other thing that's a little bit different on this brute is the shields. Not only do they appear purple, they also seem to have a different pattern to what we've seen when energy shields are normally shot at. So it's a little bit of a tricky one, and I'm at a bit of a loss, to be perfectly honest here. So if anyone has any ideas on what's going on for this brute, then please let me know in the comment section down below. But that's what we can tell from the brutes at this point in time. We haven't seen a whole lot, so this next part is a whole lot of speculation and a whole lot of guesswork. So first of all, brute Grenadiers. Please make this happen. I want to see armored, chunky boys firing off shots at me, and I would love to see them kind of waddling around in Halo Infinite. There's a good to fair chance that we are going to be seeing Halo Wars 2 vehicles in the game, and so because of that, it's probably just as likely that we may see 1 or 2 units also being transferred over to the game. I think that the Brute Grenadier is a great addition for that, because it will really help to keep the combat loop much more interesting and fresh, especially after what Joe Staten has said with the Hunters getting a fairly significant buff and being able to basically not be fooled by our usual dance moves. So because of that, you're gonna need a bit of an in-between unit, and I happen to think they would be great for this, and I guess we'll just have to see if any of that ever happens. But for now, let's move on to the Brut Stalkers. Now, these guys are basically like Brute stealth forces. If you could ever expect a Brute to be stealthy, maybe one day instead of stomping around, a Brute decided to stomp around on his tippy toes, and that's how the stealth unit was formed. But all jokes aside, these guys are pretty freaking awesome because they have active camo, but they have this really cool red eye that kind of pokes through, and it gives this really interesting look to them. I'm not really sure if we'll be seeing these guys at all, because we don't really have much of a reason to. The Silent Shadow have joined the Banished, so I don't particularly think that it would really be making any sense to have stealthy elites and stealthy brutes both in the game. Having said all of that, I want to make sure that you all understand that I don't really expect all of these things to happen, because even in the Bungie era games, unique brute enemies would only show up at some points. They wouldn't be a constant, and they wouldn't be something that you would face throughout the campaign. It would just be here and there to help razzle-dazzle up a couple of levels and make them feel a little bit more unique and stand out a bit. But I think that's probably a fair point to call it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and let me know in the comment section down below if you have any ideas for any different types of brutes that we may come across in Halo Infinite. I'll catch us all in the next one. I've been Kiv, and I'm out.